Hello, and welcome to today's Jewish Policy Center webinar. I am Shoshana Bryan, Senior Director of the JPC and your host, and you can see we have new accommodations. So let's hope everything works. Thank you for joining us. There are a lot of you out there today, and I suspect it has to do with the rising concern about the length of Israel's war against Hamas. Israel has historically fought short wars. Think 56, 67, 73, and the intifadas and the rocket wars increased and decreased in intensity, but the more intense times were relatively short. We are now 6 months into Israel's war after October 7th, and due in some measure to representations and some measure to outright lies by Israel's enemies and their fellow travelers in governments and media, some of Jerusalem's key allies appear to have lost patience with Israel. Those guys would not have done well in 1943. But I decided that what you need, what I need, is more facts, more information to keep the record straight. Our guest, Barry Shaw, today is full of facts, and we're going to turn to him shortly. I don't know if he'll make us feel better, but I know we will learn a lot. So let's do the short commercial today. We were founded in 1985 to provide perspectives and analysis on foreign and domestic policies by scholars, academics, and commentators. You can find the Jewish Policy Center on our website, jewishpolicycenter.org. There you can sign up for our Insight articles and our In Focus Quarterly magazine. The spring 2024 issue of In Focus is up now on the website. It is entitled The War of Independence 2.0. You can also go back and find winter 2024, which was devoted to the awakening in the American Jewish community after October 7th. That's jewishpolicycenter.org. The JPC supports a strong American defense capability, U.S.-Israel security cooperation, and missile defense. Now, however, and since October 7th, our most important job is to support the legitimacy and security of Israel against anyone who would deny them. And now more than ever, we support the government of Israel and the IDF in their defense of the people of Israel and in bringing the perpetrators of the massacres, rapes, hostage-taking, and rocket barrages to justice. Barry Shaw is our guest today, and he's going to help us do it. He is a Senior Associate for Public Diplomacy at the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, IISS. He regularly contributes to media outlets, including the Jerusalem Post, and he is a frequent speaker at conferences and pro-Israel advocacy events. Just to bring up In Focus again, you may have seen him in the fall 2023 issue of In Focus Quarterly, which came out only a few weeks before October 7th. What he wrote then remains relevant now, so I strongly encourage you to go back and see In Focus fall 2023 and read Barry Shaw. Barry has written several books, including Israel, Reclaiming the Narrative, Fighting Hamas, BDS, and Anti-Semitism, and BDS for Idiots. I want that last one, Barry. But now, Barry Shaw, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you, and the floor is yours.
Shoshana, first of all, I want to thank you personally and your organization for giving us an outlet in which we could pass through you a lot of facts and information and data to offset the awful sort of accusations and slanders that are being spread against Israel by people who could know the facts but simply don't, and are slandering us based on lies. First of all, I'd like to start with a couple of breaking news items just before I came on air, and the two are interconnected. You may know that a day before, Israel assassinated 3 of Ismail Haniyeh's sons in an air attack. Ismail Haniyeh, of course, is the top Hamas leader, based not underground in Gaza, but in luxury in Doha. It discovers today the Israeli intelligence have released the fact that one of the sons that was killed was intimately involved in the placement of some of the Israeli hostages that had been taken into Gaza, and he had been involved in where they are. And this links up to the second message. We have been going through months of negotiating with Hamas, the Islamic terror organization, that committed the most horrendous genocides, torture, rapes, hostage taking on the 7th of October to try and get our hostages back. Our argument to the US government was one, quite frankly, this war will end if Hamas surrendered and released the hostages. We've been begging that message for months, but the shoe was put on the other foot. That first we have to agree to a ceasefire. Hamas have added to that, we must withdraw all our troops from Gaza before they will even consider releasing hostages. Well, the latest round that was going on up till yesterday in Egypt was that we were agreeing to release 900 Palestinian terrorists, including 150 with blood on their hands, in other words, mass murderers, for the release of 40 hostages. It turned out today that Hamas released some information saying they only have 40 hostages. They don't know anymore. We had 100, what was left in our estimate was 136 hostages, including, by the way, Shoshana, Americans. Now, Hamas, as of today, is saying they only know of 40 in total. Are they alive? Are they dead? Who they are? They don't identify it. Now, I would have thought your administration would be going as ballistic at Israel, at Hamas, that the fact that you have Americans among those, I don't know. They're certainly among the 136. Do you know if any Americans are among the supposed 40 that may be alive? This is a psychological warfare that Hamas have been playing on us since the 7th of October. And this is the trauma we're still living under. And I want the world, I want your administration, and I want your media to get in tune with us and find out some of the facts and information. That's the first thing. Where are the rest of our hostages? And if they can't find it, I think this is a cause for the US government, the US, your administration, to bring the issue to the United Nations and absolutely not only condemn Hamas, but actually put a notion forward, a resolution forward, that Hamas, this internationally designated terrorist organization, should be an international arrest warrant for all the Hamas leaders, whether they are in Gaza, living in luxury in Doha, in Beirut, in Turkey, and I think there's one or two living in London even, on international arrest warrants to be taken to the International Criminal Court on crimes against humanity and war crimes against the obvious evidence we've got for that. And I add to this, Shoshana, the fact is why is it so appalling that Israel, of all people, is in an international court right now, the International Court of Justice under the United Nations, on charges of genocide. And yet Hamas gets away scot-free. And the news from today that 96 hostages have suddenly disappeared. Hamas doesn't know where they are. In other words, they are dead. That is the first thing I want to mention. Now, before we go on to other things, I want to talk about another lie that's being fed against Israel. And that is the fact that we are starving the Palestinians in Gaza, that they have a famine, that we're not allowing humanitarian aid in. This is absolutely lies. And I want to give you the statistics and the figures just to prove what a lie this is. And I beg of your media, and I beg of your organizations, and I beg of your government to use these figures to offset the lie that they have been throwing in Israel for some time. According to the United Nations World Food Programme statistics, listing Gaza as having a population of 2.2 million people. Actually, that's not right because they've got maybe up to 1.8 million. Gaza's need, this was before the war, by the way, Shoshana, 4,287 tons of food a week. Okay, let's multiply that by 6 months, say from the 7th of October today. That's a total according to the United Nations, of the food needs of the people in Gaza of 102,888 tons. That's a lot of food. So let me just give you the information that as of yesterday, Israel, in the last 6 months, and this figure comes from Kogat, have delivered 295,130 tons of food in Gaza. And if you add the 9,000 tons that went in today, that makes it 3 times more than the United Nations World Food Programme estimate for how much 2.2 million Palestinians need in Gaza to survive. In other words, we have provided, Israel alone have provided the Palestinians with 3 times more amount of food than the United Nations are saying. And this is without the food that the United States and Jordan are dropping in airlifts. And this isn't to count neither the Egyptian trucks that are going in through the Egyptian border. There are 4 crossings from Israel right now. So can we please rectify this lie and this accusation that we are creating a famine? And to prove, add to this, by the way, is there's another fact that there are now 23 bakeries working in Gaza producing 2 million loaves of bread a day. And the final thing is actually from Hamas themselves. And I quote from the April the 2nd, the Popular Resistance Committee, a coalition of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, announced in Arabic price drops for the food in Gaza. Their quote, Gaza merchants said on average family in Gaza can now buy products for a hearty meal with 100 shekels, that's $27, compared to 200 shekels, that's $54, just a few days ago. In other words, food is plentiful in Gaza. So can we end this nonsense about Israel is deliberately causing a famine in Gaza? This is a lie. I'm happy to put those 2 statistics over, and I would want the people who are watching you to please repeat these figures. If anybody needs the figures, contact me or contact Shoshana. We'll give it you again. But these figures need to be drummed in to your State Department, to your White House, to your media, and all the other decision makers who have been lying against Israel for 7 months. That's all I have to say on those points.
Okay, so then let's go to some questions that have come to us. And when the war started in October, there was clearly in Israel tremendous cohesion of the population. Everybody was on the same page. Political left, political right, everybody. How are we doing 6 months into this? Is the cohesion in Israel still as it was, or are there changes in society?
We're going through a sort of schizophrenia right now, Shoshana, because the coalition has been excellent up to about a week ago. And unfortunately, what has happened is the people that were leading the revolutions and the attempted coup against Benjamin Netanyahu before the war broke out over his court cases and later after judicial reforms have now seemed to have hijacked the hostage issue. And we've been seeing for about a week right now, the same people who staged these mass protests, taking some of the hostage families and using them as a club, if you want to call it that, to beat our prime minister with, to have him removed. And it's led to massive counter protests and, in fact, inflamed families of Israeli hostages who find that the photographs of their loved ones have been used in this attempt to try and unseat Benjamin Netanyahu against their will or knowledge or agreement. The army also is still 100% committed to finishing the job. That is to going into Rafah and finishing the job, totally destroying Hamas. I know this personally because where I live, I have soldiers in my building, and one guy who lives above me, for instance, has gone back into Gaza for the third time. Actually, he just came out, and he is probably going to be one of the soldiers being trained now for when we go into Rafah. And a lot of this has been promoted also with people, with politicians from here, and also protest organizers from Israel coming over to America and consolidating their moves with some of the people over there in Washington, including some of your politicians. Dare I mention Chuck Schumer, for one, for instance. Chuck Schumer came over to Israel about a month or so after the 7th of October and said, never again. He addressed a crowd of 300,000 pro-Israel supporters in Washington, D.C. on, I think it was January, saying we will stand solidly with Israel in its hour of need. And yet Schumer spoke at the Senate about insisting that the Israelis should create a coup and overturn our democratically elected prime minister and government. This from our total ally in America. What is this? And certainly we've had one or two politicians who have come over to America to court the people like the Schumers of the world and the Pelosi's and maybe the Kamala Harris's as well, in order to come back here and do it. And I can name names. One of those was Benny. Another one is Yair Lapid. But really, the two people, the two politicians who are behind it, and this is backed by a lot of money here in Israel and from America, are the two Ehuds, right? Now, what we noticed before the war began and there were protests going on in Tel Aviv, there were huge signs of pictures of Benjamin Netanyahu with a shoe sign in English saying Prime Minister, because he was...
Barry, let's stick with what's going on in Gaza and what Israel's going to do. But let me remind the viewers that a lot of this that Barry's talking about now, he actually covered for In Focus in the fall of 2023 issue, how the demonstrations over the summer in Israel and the problems in Israel, which, you know, in our view are worrisome, but they're an Israeli internal issue. So go back and read In Focus 2023 fall issue. But Barry, I'd like to stick with some of the things that are actually going on right now. Question from somebody who's listening: is it possible that Israel has won the battle but lost the war in Gaza? In other words, having taken out so much of Hamas's military capability. On the other hand, countries that were friends of Israel's are concerned now, as concerned in quotation marks, not just the United States and not just Great Britain, but Australia and other countries. The UAE, I understand, has at least temporarily broken its relations with Israel. Is it possible to win the battle and lose the war?
Well, Australia with their government has never been close with Israel, with Israel at all, the Australia government. Certainly not the military government and Penny Wong. Penny Wong has been so anti-Israel for a long time, before the war, but even worse since the war. They have been pro-Hamas, and they've been carrying on being pro-Hamas. But right now, yes, people are listening to their media. They're listening to their politicians, giving out this false facts and false information about Israel, and are convinced that this is the truth. This is what's happening. This is why I was keen to begin our talk or about some of the actual figures, the facts and figures that goes on, because this isn't coming over. This isn't allowed. I think once people know the figures, they will be with us. I want to tell you, those people who are listening to us right now, that in fact, I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is facing the toughest time that I know any Western leader has had in, let's say, the last 100 years. If you can imagine the internal pressures he's been having over here, and then certainly having this attack come on us on the 7th of October, and to lead the country. and to lead the country against the will of the United States government, the will of the United Nations. He is taking more in the neck that I would say that perhaps even Winston Churchill didn't have when he was facing the decision to go to war alone against Nazi Germany. And the strain that Benjamin Netanyahu must be under must be absolutely tremendous. And he is still, if you want to call it, sticking with his guns, even against the administration that is calling him all sorts of names and telling him we cannot go into Rafah. I want to repeat, every single Israeli soldier who has been fighting in Gaza and waiting to go into Gaza is saying, we go into Gaza and we finish the job. We went into this war to defeat Hamas. If we don't defeat Hamas now, they're going to come back again and again and again. And we can never have another 7th of October. One of the terms that Hamas wants to do is allow 140,000 Palestinians to move to the north of Gaza so they can move there with them and then start relaunching things again. Hamas has to be totally destroyed as a fighting unit, and it cannot be allowed to resurrect as what Antony Blinken would describe as a technocrat government together with Fatah. We are determined on that, and whether the US administration want it or not, we will be going into Gaza. And let me tell you who repeats this message. Benny Gantz, who came over to the United States, had meetings in the White House. He said yesterday that we will be going into Gaza. The difference we have over here between Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz and Gallant, the defense minister, is this. Benjamin Netanyahu said we are going into Gaza within a matter of weeks. Benny Gantz said we're going into Gaza, he doesn't know when. And Gallant says we're going into Gaza, but I don't know when either. Let me tell you what's happening right now. The army moved out of Gaza, but it is training and it is restructuring to start a new type of war, a new type of battle, but more of a surgical fight with special units going into Rafah. This is going to be a difficult battleground because you have the heads of Hamas that are still alive in Gaza, together with some of the most hardened Hamas terrorists concentrated in there. We have defeated most of the brigades. We estimate there's somewhere between about 6,000 to 7,000 Hamas terrorists to be killed in Gaza. And when we go in there, we hope to get some of the hostages. Please God, they're still alive. But we will find out what happened to the hostages because that's where they've been taken to. And after we finish in Gaza, we're going up to what's called the Philadelphia Corridor. That's the border along with Egypt, and Egypt is protesting against that. Why are they protesting? They're protesting for two reasons. They think that if we go into Gaza, the refugees that are there are going to try and flood over the border into Egypt. But more importantly, they don't want us to go into the Philadelphia Corridor for one very serious reason. Because when we go there, we are going to show you, Shoshana, and the world a network of tunnels you will not believe, because what we found up till now is nothing compared with the tunnels that come into Gaza from Egypt. These are the tunnels that for years Hamas has been driving vehicles in, driving vehicles through a tunnel. This is when you see the vehicles in Gaza City. They've been brought in not by sort of ship and not by plane and not over the border from Israel, but through these tunnels along the Philadelphia corridor. Now, if they were doing that, they were certainly bringing in rockets, and this was a highway also for the terrorists. How do you think that Hamas terrorists were popping up, for instance, in Iran? They certainly didn't come through Israel and fly to Ben Gurion Airport, right? So this is a delicate. or
So,
could eat.
so let me stop you on the issue of Philadelphia corridor and smuggling and what the Egyptians know and what they don't know. We have a question from someone here. You said that Israel has known for years about the smuggling that goes on in the corridor, and also smuggling, I suppose, by sea and other things. If Israel knew this much for this long, how do you account for the fact that the border between Gaza and southern Israel was not more securely defended, or that the IDF didn't do something about Hamas a long time ago? How did we get to the point of October 7th?
Right. It's a good question, you know, because after this war, when it's over, there is going to be an independent investigation. And certainly people are going to be found guilty of negligence, mistake, altruism, I have no idea. And one of those, that's going to head all the way up to the chief of staff of the IDF and even to the prime minister. He knows this. He knows this. But he said, let's deal with it later. Let's get this job done first of all. Now, what happened? And it's a good question. And it's one that's troubled Israel for a long time because we've known what's been going on there. But the world has been insisting that we have to send in all sorts of supplies into Gaza because that way we can critique of crime. If we want to live in peace with the Palestinians, we have to give them what they want, the cement, the iron, the food, the fuel, the water, the electricity, everything. Because we have to try and produce far better lives for the people of Palestine in Gaza. And this is what we did. This is what we did. And we knew they were digging trouble. We had to go into Gaza a couple of times before. We've had other operations where we've gone in and we found and destroyed tunnels. But we came out. And the world, the United Nations, the European Union, the US government were insisting we have to keep sending all this stuff into Gaza because we have to prove we want to make peace with these people. Well, we found out what they've done with all this stuff. And this is why we're now living in reality, a nightmare of a reality, because we were living under this myopic world, this delusional world, which says now that when we haven't finished the job yet, that we should have a ceasefire, stop everything, and that way Hamas is going to stop. And people like Anthony Biden, your Secretary of State, can create a new Palestine, which is made up of a more technocratic Fatah from the Palestinian Authority and a more technocratic Hamas to create a unity government alongside Israel. Are you kidding me?
They're not kidding you, but all right, that's their view for down here. Stretch your viewfinder for a minute and look to the north, because you have a similar situation, not the same, but a corresponding situation in Lebanon, where everybody knows that Hezbollah never paid attention to UN Resolution 1701. No matter what we say we want them to do, they don't do it. And they've embedded themselves among the people of southern Lebanon. Now you have a two-front war. And then I'm going to get to the third front of the war, which is actually Iran. So could we spend a few minutes on the second front? And then I'm going to ask you about Iran's current threats. So let's look to the north. Whatever Israel does in Gaza, it's got to do something in the north as well.
You're right. You're right. And what you've just outlined there, the message is that you have just explained, that Israel is going through an existential threat against our very existence right now. Like you said, it's not just the Gaza border, but it's also, I called it the Iranian three H's. There's Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, right? They're all proxies, client terror organizations of Iran. But let's deal with, like you said, with Lebanon. And I'll put it this way, the danger to us in Israel from Hezbollah is far greater than what we've been facing with Hamas in Gaza. And I'll explain why. Because Hezbollah has at least 160,000 powerful precision-guided missile provided by Iran that if they launched them against Israel, it would make that rocket bombardment from Hamas look like a child's firework display. Let me explain personally what this means. I'm speaking to you now from Netanya. I'm about 10 minutes walk from the sea here. But these Hezbollah rockets will not only reach Haifa, but they will reach over Hadera, north of here, where we have an important power station, go over Netanya and hit the center of Tel Aviv with no problem at all. And 160,000, they could launch them in a way that no Iron Dome system can bring them all down. And all it takes is for Iran to give them the green light, and they will begin launching it. We are on the precipice here of a major war against Hezbollah. And what's been going on for 6 months right now is they have been launching between 60, 80, 100 rockets a day in the north. We have over 100,000 Israelis who are homeless, who are refugees in their own country, who are displaced. You know, there's a kibbutz called Madara over here, and half the homes in Madara, this kibbutz have been totally destroyed. Homes are being destroyed in Kiryat Shmoni. Buildings and homes are being destroyed in Sfat. If people who know Israel, they know what I'm talking about. But the north is deserted because nobody is going to live next to the border. If you go to the border of Israel looking into Lebanon, you will have somebody of Hezbollah looking down back at you. This isn't like America fighting a war in Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya. It's next door. And what's happening right now, add whatever you need on top of that for Israel, Iran right now, as you and I are talking, are threatening of striking Israel directly because of the assassination of the chief heads of the Iranian Republican Guards Corps in Damascus. We destroyed 3 generals and 2 battalions, basically the top 5 of the Iranian regime that were in Damascus to do with the receiving of the weapons and the rockets and everything and their distribution to all the Hamas, Iranian proxies around the world. They're now headless over here, and they are going quite literally ballistic over it. Now, whether they're going to strike Israel, I don't know, but I can tell you right now that, in fact, Israel is on high alert militarily right now, not so much the Home Guard, but militarily. We have pilots on standby. We have special units on standby if anything happens. Now, they could use that either to strike us directly. I think they're going to be striking embassies around Europe or maybe some other places rather than directly. I think, and that's my strategic assessment, that they're going to keep Hezbollah tame, to keep the 160, 170,000 rockets for another time as they're getting closer to developing their nuclear weapon. And then maybe it'll learn that as well. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe the Ayatollahs in Tehran are so incensed by that, they may give the green light for Hezbollah to start launching it. But they know that we will go into Lebanon, and quite frankly, we have no choice but to destroy Lebanon, because Hezbollah are breaking United Nations laws. They should be nowhere near the south of the Litani River. This is a United Nations designated rule, a treaty, that Hezbollah would nowhere go south of the Litani River. They've been over there and they've been building bunkers and underground tunnels and armories and everything down there. And the United Nations hasn't censored them once. And I don't remember the United States administration bring this issue also to the United Nations. If they did that, maybe the United Nations could pressurize Hezbollah to go where they're supposed to be according to United Nations laws and resolution. That's north of the Litani River. No Israeli can go back to their home until they do so. Hasn't happened.
One of the things you know about the United States government is that it rarely raises issues where it knows it has no influence. And so raising the issue of Hezbollah on the Litani River in the UN is, from the US governmental perspective, a waste of time, because we know we can't fix it. And we can't fix Gaza either. But let me turn to something perhaps a little more concrete, or maybe even a little bit more positive. You get all kinds of visitors in Israel. One of them is General Eric Kurilla, the commander of the US CENTCOM. And this is not his first visit. General Kurilla has been visiting Israel regularly since he took over the CENTCOM. And I understand has worked very well with the Israeli security forces, the IDF, and with the Air Force. Talk to us, if you can, about US-Israel relations at the military-to-military level. It is a whole different bag, I think, than the governmental relations.
Yeah.
Say something happy.
I'm saving that for later.
I know.
All right, but yes, you're right. You know, military to military level, there's a great camaraderie and great friendship going on. And I'm not giving anything away, I don't believe. It's that, quite frankly, we had some visits over here because we're in CENTCOM. We were getting advice from US military about how to tackle warfare, urban warfare, particularly in a unique situation we've got with underground tunnels. And we're now 6 months later, and as you said, the CENTCOM arrived now in Israel and having meetings with us, the military over here, right now as we speak. And actually, they're coming over here and giving us the compliments, because military to military, they are telling us, we have set the example over here. The way that we have handled this campaign, that I can quote them on this, will be taught at West Point for generations to come. This is another thing that I want to spill. I mentioned about the casualty figures, right? Or maybe I should. This is another line.
Please.
If I can tell you this is vitally important, because you've been led to believe that we're going to go rushing into Rafah like Rambo or something with 1.2, 1.4 million Palestinians, and no, we're not. I mean, why don't the media over there, why don't your administration speak to us and then explain to the American people what we have done and what we intend to do? Twice in Gaza, we created humanitarian corridors, and we moved people out of the north of Gaza and Gaza City. We gave them, this is again where the American military is amazed by us. No army in the world has given the enemy heads up for a week to 2 weeks where we're about to strike, by telling the population, both in millions of airdrops of leaflets in Arabic with maps, and also SMS messages, and also phone messages, and also with emails, to leave certain areas in time because we intend to target it. That's how people left. They left Gaza City to go down south, and they were protected along the way when we find out that Hamas was actually shooting them and stopping them and trying to get them to send back. So we sent a couple of tanks in there to protect the Palestinians to go down to safety. This exercise was repeated in Khan Yunis. That's why you have 1.2, 1.4 million people living down in Rafah. Now, what Israel is going to do, and quite frankly, the American administration knows it, before we do anything in Rafah, is we're going to be dropping leaflets. We're going to be sending SMSs saying, would you kindly leave? We've opened up humanitarian crossing. We have prepared safe zones in the center of Gaza along the coast, where we are right now, I'm telling you about this, currently constructing shelters and tents, field hospitals, bringing some of the aid supplies to these areas if we can keep them out of the hands of Hamas. And we've constructed a road going from the Israeli border to the west to this safe zone as well, where a direct convoy will be coming in from Israel of food, water, medical, specifically for the people in the safe zones. Now, have you heard that anywhere before in America by the media or by our administration? No, you haven't. Why not?
Because it doesn't suit the narrative. You know why not.
But
But
the
it does
narrative
raise a question. It's happening. You've got video, you've got photographs. There are lots of outlets other than the New York Times and CNN. And by the way, I'm happy that you threw out Al Jazeera. I think it's an enemy agent operation. Are there no media outlets that you can give? I haven't seen the pictures. I know that you're building this safe zone in Gaza. I know that, but I haven't seen the pictures. And let me tell you, if I haven't seen them, an awful lot of other people who want to be helpful and want to be constructive on this side of the ocean haven't seen them either. So how do we get them out there?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Susanna, but you're getting me stoked as well, because let me address another issue, and that is the casualty figures, which is another slander that's been told against Israel.
Go ahead.
I'm fed up of the media and some of your administration quoting Hamas figures for casualties. They call it the Gaza Ministry of Health. That is Hamas. Right. I think their figures, latest figures, about 30,000 dead, right? 70%. 32.
32.
But 70% are women and children, right? So if we kill 13, 14,000 terrorists, are they included in that 30,000, 32,000? Seems nobody also in those figures. And maybe the figures of also people who have died of natural deaths in the last 6 months in Gaza, or maybe had been sick in hospital and died, and maybe they're included in the figure. Maybe there's some traffic accidents and some people were also killed in those figures. Are all those just 32,000 that we slaughtered? I mean, the conception is wrong. Let me give you one example where you mentioned the media and my personal involvement. You remember the incident of the Al Ali hospital, right? That the media in America, and certainly in Britain, were saying within minutes, that Israel had bombed a hospital, the Al Ali hospital, and killed 500 people. I was watching this as I was getting information from source, but I was watching Sky News, where Anna Botting, I will quote her, the talking head in the Sky News UK studio, was interviewing Mark Reger. And she was saying, what do you have to say about Israel bombing a hospital and 500 killed? And Mark Reger was a diplomat, and he said, perhaps you should reserve judgment until the facts of the information comes in. And Anna Botting finished that interview with the two words that should never be said by any journalist: not interested. That is dangerous bias, where you have Sky News and maybe other media who are quoting Hamas figures as if it's gospel. It turned out within an hour of that, I knew that this was an Islamic Jihad rocket that had malfunctioned and landed in the car park. I think perhaps 40 people were killed. There have been, according to IISS reports, at least 200 malfunctioning Hamas and Islamic Jihad rockets that fell in Gaza. How many were killed? Are they among the 30,000? Don't know. But according to the media, we've killed them all, including all these women and children. I put this in the hands of an organization called UK Lawyers for Israel, because I demanded an apology from Sky News, and they weren't prepared to give it, from Ann Botting. So I gave it in the hands of the UK Lawyers for Israel. I think there's a legal thing still going on, but I think more people should actually take some legal action against media when they're scandalizing Israel with misinformation and facts. And this is part of the bias that leads to the impression of people. This is basically, unless people do the homework, they believe what they're being told. And they've been told a pack of lies, and we're suffering for it.
Then we need to do two things then. We on this side, and we who are friends of Israel, one of them is not to believe those guys, but the other is to go on the offensive against them, I suppose. We can write letters, we can institute lawsuits. There are things that we could do. We have some obligation here, I suppose. First of all, not to believe the lies. We
I'm
have to say
hoping,
to ourselves,
Shoshana, you mentioned CENTCOM, and I hope CENTCOM people who go over the checking the statistics, I want somebody from CENTCOM go back to America and say the ratio between civilian to combatant deaths in Israel, in Gaza, is approximately 1.5 casualties to one. Whereas the US, when they fought anywhere, whether it's in Libya, whether it's been Afghanistan, whether it was Iraq, the ratio of civilian deaths to combatants was maybe 7 to 1, 10 to 1, those sort of ratios. I want somebody from CENTCOM to be honest. I hope he doesn't lose his job if he does so. Maybe he won't do it because of that. To go out to the United States and say, we've been over, we've studied with our partner, the IDF, as a member of CENTCOM, and this is the ratio of deaths, civilian deaths to combatants in Gaza, 1.5 to 1, which has never been done before by any army in urban warfare. Never.
It's hard to argue with the military people when they bring you military information. And happily for Israel, John Spencer, who is a professor of urban warfare at West Point, has been wandering around Israel and Gaza. And now he's back in the United States. And I will say, for anybody who's out there who wants to know what military things you should know, always look for a military man. Look for John Spencer. He's on Twitter. He writes in a variety of American publications. That's your guy. Because, Barry, I think, as you say, it's hard for active duty military personnel to do that. Spencer, who spent 25 years in the U.S. infantry, is in a position where he can, and he does. So let me go to one more thing, just one more short thing, before I ask you to give us your optimistic ending, because you know I'm going to ask you for that. While all of this is going on, and you have Iran, and you have Gaza, and you have Lebanon, you also have Judea and Samaria, and you also have what appears to be a burgeoning revolution in Jordan. So you have on all sides of Israel upheaval.
Right.
What's going on in real short terms? What's going on in Jordan? What's going on in the West Bank? Is Iran responsible for that as well?
The King of Jordan is having a difficult time right now. He's a minority in his own country, but he's really under threat from the threats from the Iraqis, proxies of Iran, who may come across the border in some major form. And I think that Israel has some sort of obligation in order to try to protect him. I think there is a treaty or an agreement between us and Jordan that if he comes into danger, if he asks for our help, we will provide that for him. So we will try to come to protect him. But yes, they're coming over there because, quite frankly, they want to turn Jordan as part of the Palestinian wave to come over and get us, but do it that way as well. But there's another front also, which is, quite frankly, which led to the incident that happened in Damascus, is that there are also a lot of Iraqi Hamas people who are now seeping into Syria to try and get close to the Golan Heights and come through that way as well. So, whichever way we look, we are really in a major existential crisis right now. And we need a strong United States to stand with us because, quite frankly, we're the only strong ally that we have. And the other, quite frankly, Israel is the only strong ally that the United States has anywhere in the Middle East. If we go, God help us all.
First of all, don't say that. Don't ever say that if you go. You're not going. And secondly, of course, you're right. So it takes us, as we're moving toward the end of the program, you are not, excuse me, you have not been very optimistic, all things considered, but you have been outstandingly informative. And so I appreciate that. But as I told you, it's our hope and our habit to try to leave with an optimistic picture of the future. Do you have one?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, they say
Go for it.
pessimistic Jew is somebody who wakes up in the morning and says, so far, so good. So if you wake up in the morning, it's so far, so good. But yeah, I mean, I have what I call a rational solution for the Gaza problem. And Anthony Blinken won't be very pleased with it because it's not a two-state solution. It has the possibility to be actually a three-state solution. And what I came up with is the idea of what I call an Abraham Accords protectorate. I call this a new Gaza for a new Middle East. Now, what's an Abraham Accords protectorate? Something wonderful happened about 4 or 5 years ago that the world seems to have forgotten about. And that was suddenly countries like the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco and Sudan were making peace agreements with Israel. The moderate Arab world were making peace agreements with Israel. And everybody said this is a miracle. And quite frankly, both sides have prospered by this. And there was talk about Saudi Arabia joining the group. That was before 7th of October. I think that maybe Iran sparked this and told his Hamas to go now in order to kill the rapprochement that was just beginning between Saudi Arabia and Israel. But if it was so wonderful then, a new miracle peace for a new world, it should happen in Gaza. It's quite simply, if we don't want, Israel doesn't want Gaza to be ruled by Hamas, and certainly don't want to be used by the Palestinian Authority, and certainly we don't want a coalition of Hamas, the Fatah technocrats, having a whole Palestinian state going from Ramallah all the way through Gaza as well. That won't work. And I certainly don't want to see Israeli soldiers' boots occupying Gaza for the next few generations. Although some people do, I suppose, but I'm not one of them. But I said the solution should really be to make an approach. I would have thought the President of the United States would be the perfect person to do this, to make an approach to not just the Abraham Accords countries, but also to Saudi Arabia, and say to Saudi Arabia, get off the bleachers, stop spectating what's going there. If you want to see a new, better, peaceful Middle East, get on the pitch and get into the game. And the way that this could happen is, I think that the UAE and the Saudi Arabia could be part of the reconstruction of Gaza, not just the physical reconstruction of Gaza, but actually the socio reconstruction, because what you've got to do in Gaza is you've got to take away about 20 years of radicalization that has been fostered by the United Nations, UNRWA schools, for instance. I don't know, Shoshana, if you've done any programs about the UNRWA school books and the educational system of a world without Jews and a geography without Israel. And then the summer camps sponsored by UN money and UNRWA, where they teach teenage kids how to fire weapons and how to use them in tactics to kill or take on the Israeli army. This has been generated into the Palestinians, both under the Palestinian Authority and under Gaza. And I'm sorry, I'm one of the people who have been slapped in the face by the reality, in that I do not see Gaza as being Hamas and 1 million or 2 million poor Palestinians. They are one and the same. And you could check this, because even recently, some polls, Palestinian polls, not ours, said that as of a week or two ago, 85% of people in Gaza would still support Hamas, and 74% of those under the Palestinian Authority would vote Hamas. This is 2 weeks ago. It's because it's been so mantled so badly. So my solution is that Gaza, it's impossible to say, okay, we're out, rule yourself, because that indoctrination is going to take a generation to get rid of. And this is why I think that the inclusion of Saudi Arabia, of the UAE, not only to reconstruct, but also reconstruct the mosques and the madrasas, but not only construct them, that they should employ the imams and the teachers in these religious schools to teach their moderate form of Islam. And as for the proper educational system, I think this should be arranged between the United States and Israel, in Arabic, of course, with the help of maybe the UAE and Bahrain as well, to teach the kids a technocrat, if you want to call it that, or a technological, mathematical education, so that the Gaza, the new Gaza, if you foresee it, could become the new Côte d'Azur of the Middle East, with a healthy tourist infrastructure, with a healthy agriculture based on technology, and also a technology center. I can tell you one person, for instance, who was about to invest millions in Gaza, a guy called Eyal Waldman. You know who Eyal Waldman is?
No.
He is the founder of a company called Mellanox, and he sold it to NVIDIA for billions of dollars. And he was about to set up a tech center in Gaza until the 7th of October. What happened till the 7th of October? His daughter Daniela and a boyfriend were slaughtered at the Nova Dance Festival. Now, in a new future of Gaza, Eyal Waldman would be prepared to put up billions to put in a tech center in the new Gaza if it was properly managed and become what I call a protectorate. He would do that. And I think the US and Israel could be responsible for building an educational system from the kids up to the university that will train them and teach them into becoming leaders of Gaza in the industry, in tech, in tourism, or in government in the world to come. Now,
basically, as we look at, because we're running out of time here, your plan for Gaza is to essentially take out their educational system by the roots and
Absolutely.
transplant something else. And I'll just remind our listeners that in this issue of In Focus Quarterly, Dr. Eliu Richter, who is an epidemiologist, makes the case that the teachings of Hamas and the teachings of the Palestinian Authority resemble nothing as much as they do secondhand smoke and asbestos. They are in the atmosphere, and you have to get them out of the atmosphere in order to raise people who are healthy and who see the future differently than their parents did, or differently even than they did in the years before. If we could get there, you know, every positive conclusion to our program comes with a big if. If we could get there, if we could get the US to sign on, if we could get the Abraham Accords countries to sign on and Saudi Arabia to sign on. But if you can't do that, unfortunately, Israel is looking at a very, very long slog. And that is not the way I wanted to end the program. That is not the positive note I wanted to go out on. But we have to go out because we're running out of time. So let me just say, Barry Shaw, you have been a great guest. We have learned a ton. People would, excuse me, people would like to see some of the statistics you gave us, so you and I can talk later about getting those. And yes, people, we will post them on the Jewish Policy Center website, jewishpolicycenter.org. You can get those figures. Watch the right TV. Follow the right people. Go to the experts for expert opinion. And Barry Shaw is somebody you should follow because he has the information. Barry, let me thank you on behalf of our listeners, and I hope we'll do this again.
I want to thank you and bless you, Shoshana, for what you're doing and for allowing us in Israel an opportunity to get some facts and figures across. I think that people badly need, and I think if they center on the truth and the facts of the information, it will give them a true perspective of what Israel is going through right now, and hopefully that would bring us the support we need.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you.